meadows. And yesterday was a little snowy and wet, and today was sunny with lots of snow. So it was a nice time to be out on the hill, bouncing around. So in a couple of hours, our hard skiing is about right these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's about right. All right, Jim Hammett, how are things going with you?
No, everything's fine. Chucker season ended January 31st, so the dogs and I are going through a period of withdrawal, but as we always do this time of year. But January was a particularly tough month for chucker hunting in the southeast. We first had that long, not long, but deep freeze. Then it snowed. Then the ice fog moved in, which is typical for January. And then it warmed up and rained, and the roads were so muddy and the potholes so deep that it was treacherous driving around back there. But we hunted quite a bit, and I bounced back and forth from John Day in the John Day Valley and the southeast, and got quite a few days of hunting in, and everything was good. I now I'm working on some projects. I recently got, I think, one about the first electric pickup in John Day. At least I don't know of any other ones. And I established a charging station down at our cabin in the Oahe and put one in here. But I just got
Is
back from
that
putting in a solar.
electric? Is that a
Yeah,
Rivian?
no, it's a Ford Lightning.
Oh, cool.
It's a really nice truck, but just got back from putting in a solar array down there. It's been my dream to, we've got so much solar panels on our house and barn that we are carbon neutral at the house. But I've been trying to work on this transportation aspect, and I'm getting closer. I mean, it's really hard to be carbon neutral, I'll tell you what, in today's society. But that's sort of been my personal goal, sort of like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. But that's kind of what I've been doing, and
Yeah, well,
having a
Jim,
good time.
I appreciate that you're doing that, Jim. And we should share. I have a Rivian truck.
Oh, you
We
do?
we should share notes, and I'll just. You talked about rearranging chairs on the Titanic. I just got back from Roatan and snorkeled on a bunch of reefs that we've known for 15 years. And this year they had a horrific bleaching episode because the water got so warm on these reefs that we've known. It was just heartbreaking to see. And then I remembered why I bought electric vehicles.
Yeah, no, no, I
It's
know.
sort of,
I
it's like, oh, yeah, that's why I got that wonderful electric truck in the first place. It just was a reminder of that. And so I appreciate your efforts. And and I'm not going to look at it like rearranging chairs on the Titanic. This is a real thing. So thanks for your update. Hey, Mark Labhart, what's going on with you?
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, we got some fresh snow yesterday. Back out shoveling snow for a few hours. We've got some elderly neighbors. So I'm kind of worked my way through the neighborhood with my snow shovel, and I ended up getting a $250 snow machine yesterday to do some snow blower. So it's a gentleman that wasn't going to use it anymore. So I'm going to be in the electric business here pretty soon. So I've got solar panels on my house, Jim and Carl. So I'm trying to do my best too. I'll close with this statement. Jim, I used to be an avid chucker hunter. And after a whole day of chasing chuckers around, I finally figured out what chuckers sound. You know that sound they make, that chuck, 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 chuck. You got to listen real carefully because it's not really that sound. It's sucker, 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 sucker. Listen carefully next time you're out chucker hunting. That's really the sound they make. So I'll end with that.
no, I'm very familiar with that sound.
Hey, Marat, how are you doing?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing fine. We had a little snow yesterday in Sisters, as Mark said, and it's pretty much melting out quickly. I've just been kind of busy indoor things, working on articles for the local paper on natural history and history. And tonight I'm the speaker for the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council series on Waichus watershed. So I'm the beginning speaker. I kind of do a Waichus 101 session, and I'll be talking about the great little project that OCRF funded for the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, which was a stewardship project. And they've pretty much finished it now. It's pretty impressive. They planted over 3,400 plants in all these big restoration projects on the lower Matolia or lower Waichus, where they've been remeandering the creek. And it takes a lot of planting. And so they had 620 kids out there and 120 community members, and they did 9 field trips. And so they're really an important partner in this neck of the woods for building stewardship and education. And they've been doing these watershed series now, and they keep filling up. Even though they do them every other year for Metolius or Waichus, they still get a full house. So I'm happy to be part of that.
And
That's
that's
about
great. So did we fund the park that got the 600 kids out there?
Yeah, I think Colleen gave a talk about it. I wasn't there that month, but Colleen Miller from the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, I think she was supposed to have given an update on that project. So anyway, yeah, they're doing good work.
Great. Hey, Liza Jane, how are you doing?
Good. Hi, everybody. Kind of running hard. We started lambing. That's happening. So far, so good.
Is anyone else getting feedback from Liza Jane? And do you have your phone on too or something?
No, sir.
I don't think it was
What's on
Liza
mine?
Jane. I think you're good, Liza Jane. I think it was someone who joined who had
It was
needed to
it
mute.
was me. I was trying to switch to my earbuds, so sorry about that.
Okay. Is this better?
Yep, it's great.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's spring like here. Absolutely crazy. My daffodils are coming up. It's wild. But I'm started lambing, had first set of twins yesterday, and that's adorable and reminds me why I have these woolly buggers around. And last week I went to Savannah, Georgia. I had never been there before. I spoke at a conference with people from all over the country about succession and land transfer for the American Farmland Trust, and that was good. So it's kind of what's happening in this corner in my
man.
world.
Liza Jane, you have an exciting life. Lambs and traveling to Savannah, that's pretty cool stuff.
Pretty fun. Yeah. I got invited for a trip in and I'll review grants, but to Spain in April. So I want to talk to you and Mauricio. I think you were hanging there before I go, but yeah,
we'll
once in
give
a
you
while I get it fit in.
We'll get you some good tips.
Good. Nice to see everybody and be here. Thank you.
Nice seeing you. Hey, Reva, how have you been?
Hey everyone. I've been pretty good. I am just recently been helping. My parents have a big meadow on their property, and yesterday and I think tomorrow we're trying to remove some of the invasive grass and plant some native plants and native wildflowers in there. So that's what I've been working on this week in my spare time.
You've got the kind of weather to get out in February to work in your yard, man. It's been a crazy time. Hey, Mauricio, how are things going?
Going well, certainly better than after the ice apocalypse that we had here in Portland about a week and a half ago, which was a nice, gentle reminder that as much as this species likes to believe that we're in control, we're just passengers in this planet, and if anything, we should just be in service of a much larger system. And so we had lots of big trees that got knocked over, and on top of lots of houses in my neighborhood, week-long absence of electricity, which is not our household was fortunately not one of those that had to be without electricity for a long while, but it's just a reminder of like, what it, should all these things that we rely upon suddenly were to be not there, how can we remain functional? And I don't know. I think it was important for all of us to experience that and to renew our sense of purpose of why we do what we do, and who's really in charge. But other than that, just getting back in the swing of things. Just came back from taking my daughter to a Lego engineering class in OMSI and exploring the museum with my twins and building little structures in these giant like wooden block things. And it's a nice spectrum of how life can be and move suddenly and then be calm, and just the beauty of it all.
Mauricio, thanks for that. Thanks for that incredible discussion of your recent thoughts and activities, man. That's great. All right. Well, I think I got everybody. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. So, okay. Well, we've got a big day today.
Jenna Marmon is here, I think.
Who is?
Yep. Jenna Marmon.
I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I switched to my headphones as well, and I'm trying to figure out. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. All right. There we go.
Yes. All right. Apologies if there was some feedback in there. Hey, everyone. Phoning in today from Bend. I just arrived literally like 5 minutes ago, so I'm a little stir crazy. So I'm going to get up and walk around after 4 hours in the car. But yeah, everything's going well in my neck of the woods. A little bit busy, but hanging in there. Good to see everyone. Sorry to miss the last meeting. I was actually in West Virginia. I would have rather been in Savannah, but West Virginia was also nice and a good learning experience for me. So.
What is that? What is your screen in the back? Is that Central Oregon?
Yeah, it's actually from Smith Rock. I did a hike about, I believe it was right around June. I got up early. Only person on the trail. It was lovely. Yeah. So that's looking from the summit of Smith towards.
Man, we live
north, if I remember right.
We live in a great state, don't we?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yep. Thinking about the Owyhee, I heard Jim mention we're trying to get on that river this spring sometime, but it's so fickle. So we're not very flexible as a good bureaucrats.
There's going to be a ton of water on it, I think, this year. I've never seen it quite so wet. I mean, last year was wet, but I think this year is going to be another wet year. So this would be a good year to get on it.
Excellent. Good to know.
Well, now we all know somebody in that country, knowing Jim, and I think you're going to end up having some visitors out there, Jim. You live that's a great area where you have your cabin. All right, so Reva, have I got everybody now? Do you need to introduce everybody in the audience and acknowledge them?
Yeah, Carl. We have quite a few people that have joined today, so I'll just thank them for joining. We have Aubrey Cloud, and of course we have Tiffany Caldwell. We have a few folks from ODFW Contracts Department that have joined today. And these are the ones that are working diligently to get our OCRF agreements signed and contracted. So shout out to them for all their work. We have Claire Duval and Marcus Jones who have joined from contracts. Welcome.
Hey, Reva, having those folks here, I do want to shout out to them and make sure they know how much we appreciate what they do. They're definitely behind the scenes, but we also recognize that without them, none of the stuff that we do would happen. And we know that there's have been a lot of different glitches, and there's always some obstacles to cross, and really, really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. So thank you for being here, and just know that we really appreciate the work.
Thanks, Carl. We also have, let's see, Mike Toady from Oregon Hunters Association. Thank you for joining, regularly joining as well. Mikey Brooks, and I think that's all I'm seeing. Of course, Sarah Reif as well. Thanks everyone for joining today. Appreciate it. Carl, I believe you're muted.
Yep. So the next thing to get some business done is to pass the minutes. Do you have that, Reva?
I do. Everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
So can someone make a
Sure.
motion?
I'm happy to. This is Mauricio. I move to approve the January 10th, 2024 meeting minutes with a continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor? Looks like we got unanimous approval. All right, so that is one agenda item down. The next one we have is a review and approve the OCRF urgent grant process. I think Reva has some slides to bring us through that. You recall that we've had instances where we've had some time-sensitive projects that have come up, and folks have presented them to us, and we're just trying to codify a process that's fair and transparent. So Reva, why don't you run through that?
Sure thing. So this is our proposed urgent grant process that would happen outside of a regular grant cycle if there is an urgent, time-sensitive, high priority need for funding from OCRF. So this is what we have drafted up. It's that the applicant would fill out a pre-application form, which is a short form that was sent out, and I also have a slide on it in the next slide. And that should be a quick rundown of the project and why it is so urgent and what the time-sensitive need of that project is and what program priorities it would be addressing. And then the pre-application meeting with myself, with ODFW, as a scoping meeting, and then I would bring that to the chairs, so Carl and Mauricio, and if they believe that the chairs believe it's a viable request, then the chairs would form an urgent grant subcommittee, and this would consist of less than or equal to 4 members, one of which would be the chair. And so if that subcommittee got formed, then they would review the pre-application and they would receive a short presentation from the applicant. If approved for next steps by the subcommittee, it would then move, the applicant would need to fill out a full application. So here's where we're trying to make it more similar to the regular grant cycle process. So they'd fill out that full application. It would go through review, technical review, and then the subcommittee would review it as well. Once that review process was done, it would be taken to the full advisory committee to receive the application and the pre-application, all documents. And then they would again present at our regularly scheduled public meeting for the committee. The committee would then consider the project and recommend it for funding. And if approved, it would then be taken to the Fish and Wildlife Commission for final approval. So that last half is very similar to our regular grant cycle process. And then the main difference is here is that pre-application form and then forming a subcommittee beforehand. Mauricio has a question.
Yes, and I'm wondering if it would be also relevant to establish a timeline for defining urgency and the overall process, because I think that may also, if it's an urgent matter, then it seems like folks should know approximately what are we looking at in terms of going through this process.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, I think we had something like that, Reva, the sort of a definition of what that was. It seems like when we embarked on looking at this, it's like I thought we had a definition. It's like a project that the applicant feels can't be addressed in the usual grant cycle, because the recommendation would be just put it through the regular grant cycle. But somewhere, Reva, maybe Sarah can recall that we had an actual definition for it. Sarah, I don't know if Sarah's still there. Whether she has.
For a timeline of the how long this process would take, or what would qualify as an urgent grant?
I think Mauricio, weren't you asking for like what constitutes an urgent grant?
Yes, and within that definition, then determining what a reasonable timeline would mean from the moment the pre-application comes in until it's for a final commission approval. Jim also has his hand up. I think,
yeah. So it just it would really depend on, for a timeline of how long this process would take, would depend on when that urgent grant was brought to us and how it aligns with our regularly scheduled meetings, and then the commission meeting, how much we could fast track it, and then when we could schedule the subcommittee to get together. So it would really depend on when it was received and the timeline of those meetings. But if it's very urgent, this process isn't, super lightning speed. It's not going to happen in 2 weeks. And it still would have to go through the contracting process. But this is an option for outside of the regular grant cycle. Maybe it could happen within 3 months as a fast track, compared to them waiting till the next regular grant cycle popped up.
Jim, you have your hand up?
Yes, just for my education, how many of these has the committee had in the past, and have you dealt with in the past?
We've had, I would say 3, maybe.
3.
The one that comes to mind is the department came to us with an urgent request regarding drought messaging, kind of right when we were I think 2 years ago, right in the cusp of the worst drought we'd ever had. And there was a lot of concern about getting some messaging out to people in outdoors about ways to mitigate impact on wildlife. And they felt that it was too urgent to wait to go through the regular funding cycle. And we followed a process very similar to this then, and ended up funding that particular project.
So the other comment I have is it doesn't seem like it's very fast. But by the time it goes through technical review and the advisory committee and then the 2 committee meetings, it looks like about a 3-month process at a minimum. And that if it's really urgent, I'm not sure that time frame is going to be acceptable for many of these things that might come up. And that's the reason I was asking about something that would come up. But that's just a comment. I don't know how to deal with that. I think there's other issues, obviously.
We had some debate about whether to even do this anymore, but we felt like it, at least internally, that it was useful. Again, we funded, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but that drought one was the one that stands out to me.
Yeah,
It
we used
was-
to, if I could help out a little bit with that question, Carl.
Yeah.
And just for the public's benefit, I'm Sarah Wright. I'm the Habitat Division Administrator and help support the OCRF program. We changed the nomenclature. Like, we used to call these special projects, and they could come up kind of opportunistically if it wasn't necessarily that they had some sort of urgent criteria to them. There's a lot more history I can go into about the era when we were bringing in private donations and matching them with state funds, but that's sort of a bygone era. But I think that that's part of what we're doing now is we clarified in our most recent administrative rule revisions that you all just approved a couple meetings ago, or the commission approved a couple meetings ago, I should say, to sort of reframe these out of cycle opportunities as more of an urgent need rather than just a special project that can kind of come up whenever. And so that's what we're trying to do now is clarify operationally what we mean by urgent and what the process should look like. And I just want to tee up, I think Reva's next slide will show you the actual questions that would get asked of urgent grant applicants, including what makes your project urgent? Why is it urgent? And so in some ways, that criteria, it might be too subjective for us to on this front end say what we think urgent means specifically, like it has to be done within 6 months or something like that. It might just depend on project to project, and it's the applicant's sort of burden to demonstrate the urgency, but that it might vary from project to project. Just that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Mark Stern.
Yeah, I think following up on Jim's comment, I wonder about the box in the lower right-hand corner for the applicant presentation. We don't typically have applicants make a presentation at our meeting, so I'm not sure why the urgent one would warrant having a presentation. And if it goes back to the full committee, maybe it doesn't have to be at a full committee meeting, but it could be, done more expediently by email and communicating that way rather than having to wait for a regularly scheduled meeting. So just 2 observations to think about.
I think
Thanks, Mark.
some of that was there because of precedent. If you recall, we did want to have a presentation from the drought project to kind of inform us what they really were thinking. So they did give a presentation, and whether or not we need that is certainly a decision we could make.
Maybe it could be optional.
Yeah. That's an option. Liza Jane.
Thank you, Carl. I think I'm going to build on Jim and Mark here and look for some ways we could become more urgent in our response, and if it would be possible to do some of these boxes ahead of time, like who would be willing to serve quickly on an urgent grant subcommittee with the chairs? Is it possible to have reviewers with ODF&W available ready? It's only a 3-page application, so it feels like we have some things we could do to speed this up. I don't know about building a contract, but we haven't had a lot of them, So it may not be a big task, but I think we've got some slack in there we could pull up.
Great. Well, let me tell y'all what I'm hearing here, and what my expectations were, which is not what I'm hearing. My expectations were that there would be some pushback on even the concept of this. And I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing on the opposite, and that is this isn't fast enough, which I'm actually happy that that's the case. I think we as a committee, we're evolving. We've always been really nimble and able to deal with things as they come up, and I don't want to lose that. And so I'm very happy to hear that the biggest concerns is that this urgent project process is too long. I think that speaks well to the committee, and I appreciate that. So with that, I think we've gotten some great suggestions. And I think, did I just see a comment? Jenna, did you have a comment?
She posted in the chat, Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in my experience, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I see your hands up. Go ahead, Jenna.
In my experience with other grant programs, mostly around transportation and trails, a lot of times people really want to have that opportunity to give a presentation. So you might end up getting people who just want the chance. They're like, oh, this is urgent because I want the chance to give a presentation. Just something to think about. There are some implications, or could be some implications there.
We did build into this, the up to the chair and co-chair, if this really even qualifies. So we have a filtering mechanism to try to make sure we truly are dealing with urgent things before we bog people down. So I think we got that. I think, we'll be able to filter these well. And the rest of it, I think we could tune up so that the idea of making the presentation optional, then that does give people that want to give a presentation the option to do so. That's one change. As far as I think maybe one way to approach this, we do have a sense that the committee is interested in making sure that we are able to respond to these things in a timely manner. Maybe we can put a few tweaks in this that we have discussed, like making the presentation an optional thing, and go ahead and move forward with it and just see how it works. See if we get an urgent project and it turns out to be too onerous a process, we'll be able to deal with it. Sarah?
I think we can definitely do that. I will just say that we cannot have the committee making a collective decision via email, but you could consider having a special meeting that is sooner than just for this specific agenda item. It would need to be publicly noticed that you were going to have a meeting. But you could do that if let's say the urgent grant request comes in and you've got, a whole nother month before a regularly scheduled meeting. If we were able to get through the review and full application submittal and scoring quicker than a month, then you could schedule a special session just for the specific consideration of that agenda item. What you would still then have to wait until the next commission meeting, because they're the ones that ultimately approve the expenditure. So I don't know how much you gain there, but you have that option at least. Just wanted to clarify on the email approval that wouldn't be a public process.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, that I'm glad you brought that up. And in fact, there's a precedent for that. We did have one of the, I'm not going to remember which one it was, but we called a special meeting because we weren't going to be able to get it in time to go to the commission. So we did do that on one of our special, might have been the Forest Park one, but one of the projects, we called a special meeting, we got a quorum, we held a public event and approved that program. So So we could certainly add that in there. Why don't we, what I'm hearing is two concrete additions to this. One is to make the presentation. They may want to forego a presentation if it maybe would make the project quicker and say, okay, we're not going to do the presentation, we'll just go ahead. Or they could give a presentation if they'd like, and that there can be a separate meeting called to consider the project and add that to this process. How does that sound?
Yeah, Carl, just to clarify, my thing about the optional presentation was optional if we, the OCRF Advisory Committee, wanted to have the presentation because we felt like we needed it more at our discretion rather than that of the applicant.
And which presentation? Is it the subcommittee presentation from the applicant or the presentation to the full advisory committee that would be optional?
I've been thinking of this conversation as being the full.
The full, okay.
Full. Any other thoughts about this? Marat?
I was just remembering back, we called this the Special Projects Committee, and we did go through a number of these, and not only were they outside the grant cycle, but they were also outside the funding amount that we normally did, I think, in most cases. So it was a much larger amount of funding than we've normally done, but in most cases it had some giant match that was coming with it, only with a certain date, and that was part of the urgency.
Yeah, I think the intention here would be whatever we've bumped up our minimum quite a bit. We're not going to be confronted with those big projects with a match anymore. That's not likely going to be, that's not something that's in our operating procedures. So this would be presumably limited by whatever is our current ask is. It's just that they're asking for this to be considered outside of, quicker in that process. Is that clear? Are people clear on kind of what this is all about? And if so, if with those changes, I still think we can put optional in there, and then it's optional on our part and optional on their part, and allowing us to call a special meeting if it's prudent. Does this process meet everyone's expectations, or anybody have any serious heartburn about them? Do we need to vote on this?
You have one more slide.
Yeah. So
Oh.
I have the pre-application questions that we could look at together as well. Here. This is a drafted urgent grant pre-application form where they'd be explaining why this is an urgent project, why does it need funding outside of our regular grant cycle, is it ready to go, does it have all necessary permits secured, and then a quick narrative, a summary of the project, what program priorities are going to be addressed, Oregon Conservation Strategy species, and if it addresses outdoor equity.
Liza Jane?
Thank you. Two questions that popped up for me was budget. Was budget for the project left out on purpose? And also, how do they intend to measure for their success? Those two things seem important to me, but Maybe that was intentional.
Well, we have the funds requested from OCRF at the top, but we don't have on here a project maximum, which we could put if we decide on one for these urgent grants, or we could see what happens with these when we haven't received any yet.
Hey, I think the answers to those questions, Liza Jane, is those would come in the full application. This is like this is like, hey, we had this urgent request. And basically the chair and co-chair would look at this and go, yeah, I don't think so. Or this is really key, go ahead and write a full application. And then they would answer all those questions that you just posed. So this is more like, do we even get in the queue? Do we even get in the door? And this should be enough information for the chair and co-chair to decide, yeah, this is worth pursuing.
Absolutely. My brain skipped the pre-word in the application. So all makes sense now. It's like,
no,
wow.
Thank you. That helped. That's helpful in just clarifying the process and how this all goes down. I mean, there are some steps. They're not, it looks like it's going to be a long process because there's so many boxes, but I don't think it's going to be that long a process. It's going to be turn this in, we go yes or no, then the next thing happens and the next thing happens. It's not a really involved process. I think my inclination would be just to go with this, and then if we need to tweak it, we can do that later. But I think this is a pretty well lined out thing, and I appreciate the input. I think we've certainly made it better. Mauricio?
Yeah, if I can share just a piece of unprocessed thinking with the group, and I promise it will be brief.
You've never not done that before.
Well, now I apologize in advance for my misdeeds. So I guess the word urgent in a process that could potentially at the minimum take 3 months feels a little bit disingenuous. Like, I think outside of the cycle makes perfect sense. Maybe once somebody determines the urgency of a project and it just wouldn't be, it just doesn't fit with the regular granting process cycle, that makes sense. I love the idea of this group and this of the OCRF being able to be responsive to the needs of folks that may otherwise not be able to get it elsewhere. I really like that. I think that's because of it, it would be lovely if we could have some realistic expectations as to what we really mean by urgent. 3 months at a project that tells me like, oh, we need this urgently. Okay, so it's 3.5 months. To me, just already brings it back to like maybe inconveniently, in terms of when they could apply elsewhere. Urgent doesn't quite sit well with me if that's really the timetable that we're looking at. That's the only thing.
I mean, I don't disagree with the word urgent. That to me, that doesn't quite encapsulate what we would capture with this. I don't know what another word would be. But this is kind of
expedited. Like, expedited feels a little bit like it's not the same, but But what I'm saying is that if somebody hears OCRF is doing this, there has this opportunity for urgent grant making that is outside of the cycle, people would take notice and imagine something that is not just as close to our normal cycles, I imagine. So I don't know, it depends.
I would point out that the other thing too is really if you follow our regular cycles, you're talking, it's a 6-month deal. So we even with this process, which I don't think is going to take 3 months, even with this process, it's going to be quicker than going through the regular grant cycle. But I know the urgent somehow doesn't totally capture what I think of, like bringing projects to us outside the cycle urgent is okay, but not perfect as the right word for it. Any other thoughts on that? And we'll give Mauricio time to carefully formulate what he was going to say. Mark Stern.
I think Mauricio makes a good point. I think, and I can look at Sarah's face and see it, our OARs that we just went through used the term urgent. So I think we're kind of, for better or worse, stuck with the term urgent now. But I like Mauricio's approach of saying, maybe quickly in the narrative, saying these urgent grant applications is intended to expedite the process, which begins to maybe address a little bit what you, Mauricio, were getting at, because I agree. Something like that might be a better word if we had our druthers, but maybe that's a way to moderate the use of the word urgent there.
I think we could certainly put something in the preamble here of like, and this is consistent with OARs. What we think of an urgent grant is something that is time sensitive, is addressing a critical need, and you are unable to apply during the normal grant solicitation window. I mean, the project urgency questions that we ask are tied to the definition of urgent from the OARs. But we could also have a caveat sentence in there that is just like, be advised that urgent grants doesn't mean you can have access to those funds immediately. There is still the process of approval and grant agreements, et cetera, that just so they, a little qualifier on what urgent typically means versus what we mean. I think that's well received feedback.
Are you good with that, Mauricio? Looks like it. Thank you very much. Well, as usual, this committee just makes things better. By the way you guys deliberate on things, it's really fun for me to watch it happen. Even something as simple as this. Thank you all for all the energy you put into thinking about this stuff. So I think we're good with this. Do we need to do something formally?
Hey, Carl, I just have a quick question. This is Jenna.
Yeah, sure.
I just have a quick question. So if an applicant wants to propose a project, but the solicitation is currently open, there would not be the option to go through the urgent process. Is that a true statement? Like, do they have to wait for the regular solicitation, or do they have to go through the regular solicitation, or is this always an option?
I think the way I would see that is it's pretty much always an option, but where the buck might stop is where the co-chairs say, look, just put it, the thing is open, put this into the regular cycle. Or it could be so urgent that we say, oh, okay, great, we got to look at this right now. So I think it would be open whenever, and that's the beauty of that first pass. We don't have to take everybody's time. That's putting some trust in your chair and co-chair, but we would be able to just kind of say, nah, just go ahead and apply to the regular session.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful. I thought that might be helpful in clarifying the verbiage too.
So Carl, this is Mark. Maybe just a thought process here. Maybe put a little pressure on Sarah and Reva during a break. Maybe they could work on the wording, the draft wording of those boxes, and then come back after the break and just propose what the wording would be so that everybody's on the same page. Because I hear quite a bit of movement around and what they're thinking and stuff. And I don't know if Sarah, Reva can, what you heard, and then come back when we do have a break a little later and see if there's a document that, oh yeah, that's it, we got that, so that everybody sees the same thing. Thoughts on that, Carl?
I love it. Thanks for coming up with that. Reva, is that something, Reva, you and Sarah are comfortable with?
Yeah, so I heard add a preamble for how it's more of an expedited process and try to add more language in there besides urgent. Add in the optional presentation. And then also the option to reschedule our meeting to make that timeline a little bit tighter for an applicant for an urgent need. We can work those things in there. Anything else I'm missing?
Those are the ones I recall.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, that keeps us well on track. Thanks, Mark, for that great suggestion. We can give some time to digest that a little bit, but we really need to be ready to move on to the next part. And this actually puts us slightly ahead of time. That's getting us into our strategic plan. I'm not sure.
I don't know if Cheryl Lynn is here yet.
I'm not sure if she's here either. Well,
So
I'll tell you, with her not here, did all of you get a chance to look at the strategic plan? Like, raise your hand if you actually looked at it beforehand. A few people have. Well, what's your take? Just a quick take before Cheryl Lynn comes on. Anything that you're think we missed, or that we should work on more, or is there anything particular? I think Liza Jane.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And I say that with shock because I usually don't think they are. I think they're so wordy and just so like, woof. And I question who they're serving, but I think this reflects us really well. I had a question on page 6 about ORCF point of view, but I think when we get to it, that is an easy answer probably. But I thought it was really good. It was, yeah, awesome.
That's great.
Fantastic.
Liza, hearing that from someone who sounds like has been involved in a lot of these.
Oh, so many.
That's great to hear. I'm the same. I feel Liza Jane, I have the same reaction, but thank you.
But most of the time it's because it feels like, when are we going to get something done?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I didn't have any frustration with this at all. I thought it reflected our values and what we're trying to do. It was easy to understand, had the things that are important to us are reflected in there. And I just think it's great. So.
Well, thank you, Liza Jane. Jim?
Well, my initial impression as I clicked on that PDF is that I was going to get a 30 to 50 page document. And when it came up as 12 pages, I went, wow, this is great. And as I went through it with the sequence, we used to call it purpose and need, but it's all in there. The reason we're doing this, the obstacles, I thought it was great. I mean, I've got some individual comments on it, but I think overall, I'm very impressed with it. I think it's a workable document, and I am. It's every page is meaningful. So that's my initial reaction. It's great.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Mark Stern.
Yeah, I would second the comments of Liza Jane and Jim there. And, having come from an organization that specialized in incredibly long strategic plans, as most of you know, I worked with the Nature Conservancy for a long time. But anyway, I really like the document for the reasons Liza Jane and Jim both said. I guess the one area where I'd like to see a little more specificity is in sort of how it all becomes actionable and where it calls executing the plan. And to me, I can see some no regret activities that we could move forward on now, as well as doing what's listed there. And a couple that come to mind is, some of you know, 2 years ago, the governor declared the Nature Day of Oregon, and that was sort of using OCRF as the vehicle to proclaim that day. And we had a celebratory event, and we had people from the governor's office and legislators there. So I think that's one opportunity that I don't know that we have to wait to get it to figure out if that's a good thing to do or not. And then another one might be something like working with Oregon Field Guide to have them tune into this program, highlight what OCRF is, and then try and begin to feed them some of the projects or give them the opportunity to pick from our list of projects as they develop their, viewing menu, so to speak. Because I think they're always looking for projects, and I think we've got a lot to offer them. So I'd like us to look on a couple of those no regret action kind of approaches to add to what's already there.
Brett?
Well, I also really liked it. I thought it was super. I love the emphasis on collaboration starting right off. And I guess my main reaction was that, we'd used our time well. We kind of had a lull in the winter, and instead of just sitting around twirling our thumbs, we worked on the strategic plan, and it was time well spent. We have a lot of work ahead of us. That was one sense I had, was that we really need to get some different people together to talk to scientists, to reach out to our partners, to start looking at non-traditional partners. So a lot of work ahead of us. But yeah, I thought it was really good.
Thank you, Brett. I'm going to preempt Mauricio, who has his hand up. I think part of the reason he raised his hand was to correct Mark Stern that it's not the Nature Day of Oregon, it's the nature of Oregon. So,
Wow.
you may have more.
Not at all, but good catch. So I similar to Mark's and Moretz, I think that this document was a beautiful encapsulation of our collective thinking, and sort of like it does a really good job at setting a North Star for what we want to do with it. But similar to Mark's comment, my objections and often skepticism with strategic documents is that it often becomes an aspirational piece of something. And I'd love for us to use it as an accountability tool of the things that, how this manifests in the real world as the kind of things that we want to do with it. I love that Mark's already thinking about how we can start getting this thing going and doing what it's supposed to do. I also understand that there are some steps that need to take precedent, like selecting our audience. Is this the best avenue for us to get to the people that we want to reach? And so I think I see it both as a great document for us to get going, but also sort of like as a big responsibility. Like, what are we gonna do with this? And how is it we can take ownership of what it means? And so I am challenging us all to make something happen with this now that we have a shape that we can follow.
Thanks, Mauricio. I think Mauricio came up with the term the nature of Oregon. That's why I was defending it. I wanted to make sure we got it right. Liza Jane?
Thank you. I have one more thing I think is important to me that I wanted to share, is I think this strategic plan helps people outside of our group understand what we do. It clarifies recreation. It clarifies, how we tie to the strategy. It's really good for someone else to read to understand what we mean by what we do. So that's as important. And I didn't say that.
Hey, Liza Jane, I got bumped off just now, so I didn't. Did you finish your comment, Liza Jane?
Yeah.
Because I missed it. Sorry.
I'm just saying it's good for the public to understand what we do and when we do it and how we do it and what we mean by what our words. And I think that's important too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. The reason I got bumped off, I was actually trying to get hold of Sherilyn and didn't. She is not signed in.
I emailed her as well, Carl.
So she emailed me. She's running a little bit late. I think she's in a meeting that's about to get out. So she should be here shortly. But Carl, if you wanted to jump ahead, I could do an RFP update, but I don't want to get us too off track.
No,
since we've been talking about strategic plan.
Yeah, let's see if we can move something up from the later part of the meeting so we can still get done in a timely way. So you have that update from the for the RFP. So yeah, let's go ahead and hear what you
Yeah.
got on.
All right. Just a second. Okay, so I just wanted to give a quick update. We are now live. Our site is live on the new grant software system, which is very exciting. We've been up for a week now, and it's going pretty well. We have received about 6 draft applications so far, and it's been up for a week, so we're getting about 1 is coming in per day. That's roughly the trend I'm seeing. So that's very exciting.
In the past, we would not get any grants for a while after this was out there. Maybe it's because there's a bit of a pent up demand since we didn't have, but I guess that's encouraging, but also daunting that we already have 6 applicants.
I think the main difference here is it's also that I can see with this new system applications that are in progress. So I think before it was only, you could see ones that were fully submitted potentially. This one, I can see them in progress. So there's 6 in progress. So yeah, I'm just able to see more of the process and help out folks along the way if they run into anything as they're applying. So yeah, I'm excited about this new software and how it's working for the applicants. This is a press release that went out last week, and I sent this out to all of you, and you're welcome to share this with your networks. And it's an announcement for the grant cycle, has a link for more information, and highlights some OCRF projects as well. Like the Source One Serenity project, Boulder Creek Wilderness Trail, and then the Klamath Bird Observatory's Oregon Vesper Sparrows project, tracking Oregon Vesper sparrows.
I really like, Reva, the way you included the 140 projects funded since 2020 totaling over $5 million. I think that we've concluded from our strategic plan, we have to tell our story better, and that's a way to do it. You know, let's get it out there wherever it's appropriate. So thanks for including that.
Yeah, and this wasn't all me. This is I worked with Adam Baylor at ODFW, who helped with this press release. So yeah, he did a great job.
Well, extend that to that. We appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll let him know. Thanks so much. So, and then I just wanted to real quick go over with everyone, get this timeline on your agendas again, on your radar. This is, so we're in the green box right now of we're open, and we're open from now until March 26th, accepting applications. And then just to keep in mind that the OCRF committee would be reviewing April 25th through May 23rd. And I will be at our next meeting, I'll be able to go over what the review process will actually look like for you in the new system. And then, of course, I'm happy to meet one-on-one with anybody that needs help with it. If you want an orientation to how it's going to be working, you're going to have a split screen where you'll have the project that you're going to be reviewing on one side and your scoring criteria on the other side of the screen. So I've seen what it looks like for you. And again, happy to meet with anybody one-on-one to go over it.
Yeah, that's really helpful to just everyone keep in mind this timetable about when you're going to need to be thinking about doing things so that you can schedule that into all of your all's busy schedules.
All of your exciting travel. Yeah. And then, as I said, we do have 6 draft applications in there. So we've been live for a week. We've already got 6. And if we continue on this trend, we may have 60 by the end of the funding round if we keep getting 1 per day.
I think
But
this
that's
is telling
on par.
we're going to have more than 60.
You think so? You may be right. Last round we had, last year was 73 applications total, which I had heard was the most you had received in a round. So we'll see where we get with this one. All right, and that's all I had for the RFP update, but if there's any questions about that new fondant process, about the review process, we'll be going over that more at our next meeting.
Great. Well, Sherilyn is here now, so I think we can move ahead. Sherilyn, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Hey, Sherilyn, we finished early a little bit, and so I did some polling of the committee on your product and your plan, and I think I'll try to paraphrase for you the feedback I got from them, and they all hated it. I'm sorry. Well, actually, no, that's not right. Actually, just the opposite, Sherilyn. We got really nice feedback. People appreciated the brevity and appreciated the action items and the way you distilled our 3 months of effort into a really nice document. So thank you for that. That was the basic gist of the comments.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Carl and Mauricio met a colleague in me mine that's been helping me get that brevity, which is really hard to do. And I still think there's some cleanup that can be done in the final rounds. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. I had given Reva a heads up that I was coming right from something else. So good. I'm glad we covered that. That was what I was hoping to hear. And I'd already had some conversations with Carl and Mauricio and Sarah and Reva. So when I sent out the draft plan, I had mentioned that first section of the document, through page, whatever that is, 7 or 8. Please, though, in that section of the document, if you said, I really, I don't know why we're using that word, or there'd be a better way to describe this, I'm still taking that feedback. I just didn't want to do that kind of wordsmithing in the document as a group, because that's pretty painful. Why would we do that if we're on the right track? So we are not doing that today, but I do want to talk about the back end of the plan, which I took a lot of liberty in trying to put some stuff there because we hadn't talked about it as a group. And so that's the place I thought we'd spend our time today, getting your feedback on how we describe those actions and the timeline, etc. I saw some people, like Reva, sent me some comments today, but I haven't had a chance to look at them. So it's not that I ignored your feedback. I just was in a meeting pretty much all day. So anything that somebody sent me today, I haven't put in there. So this is the section of the document I'm talking about where we took each kind of priority area. We took some key actions that we thought were really important, the key things that we would do, took a stab at what the timeline might look like, and then wanted to say, well, how would we measure success, right? How can we hold ourselves accountable to the plan? We talked about that we'd probably be reviewing the plan, not to redo it every year, but every year you should be able to gauge, are we making progress towards these things? How are we doing towards meeting those progress indicators? So there's a slide like this that's now in the strategic plan, one for each of the 4 priority areas. And so this is where I thought we would spend the time today. Make sense? Awesome. So this is the place where, yes, we didn't talk about it as a group. I took my best guess based on all the things I have sort of picked up and working with you all. So you will not hurt my feelings if you say, I really think these actions or need to be reworded, or we want to add something, or we want to rework something, and or of course the timing is an important one too. So we'll go through them just kind of one at a time, and I'll kind of take my side notes so that I can do another round of editing on this. But this was the priority around broader awareness and understanding. And the plan itself in the first 7 pages obviously has more details around this, but I tried to condense this down into communication, resources, and plan. So that's about securing resources to help us do said plan, which probably involves a consultant, and developing the plan, etc. And so that's action number 1. I do remember somebody gave me feedback. This is probably a longer time frame. Not sure that it would be done in whatever this is, within the first half to 3/4 of 2024. So I did get that feedback. Opportunities and urgency messaging. I think I saw a message on what's urgency messaging. So if you remember, there's wording up above around really explaining why there's a sense of urgency in investing in conservation and recreation. So I agree that we might need to reword that one a little bit because other people might not know what we meant by urgency messaging. Developing stories and multimedia assets, which is kind of an ongoing thing. I think once you have a communications plan, you'd likely start doing that. But you'd probably be doing that every year throughout the course. And in fact, you might want to just extend that arrow out through the end of the plan term, now that I'm looking at it. And then there was a variety of activities around reaching out to untapped markets and people that might benefit from the fund. So that's kind of my summary of what I did, and already some edits I think we can make. Other questions or areas where you think some edits might be warranted?
I'll say I do have a comment about this just in general and this idea of our communication plan. We have an agenda item after this to discuss this a little bit further, but I had a conversation today with Debbie in the department about funding and just where we are, how things are going. It's a very productive discussion. We were talking about the OCRF, and as we were kind of getting to the end of the conversation, Debbie says, we really need to put the story together and get the story out about the OCRF. And I was happy to say that is a major part of our strategic plan. And she sees the value in that. And so I think the fact that you have, if anything on these, the timeliness of it would be to move the arrows to the left as much as we can, and as much as realistic to really start. I think this is going to be foundational for us in securing our future and to move our mission forward. So appreciate the extra time that we're taking on this.
Yeah, I sort of had that as one of the things you're starting right out of the gate, right? It's one of the most important things. Mark?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Carl said before, I did really like the first 7 or 8 pages of it, and I thought you did a great job of sort of orchestrating that and putting it in a succinct way that is easily consumed, absorbed, and read. As I shared with the group before a little bit, I guess I'm interested in the action items, if we can also consider what maybe I'd call some no regret actions in terms of the communication in particular, because I guess I worry about when you have a plan that has the plan is to have another plan, but I'd also like to see some things that we're actually going to do. And as I shared with the group, 2 years ago, we'd had the Nature Day of Oregon event, and I don't know if you were tracking OCRF at that time, but it was a big celebratory event with the governor's office was there and legislators and a lot of our project applicants and just getting it out, something, but declaring that as a day of recognition for the state of Oregon. And some other things, maybe like begin to get connected with Oregon Field Guide, which is the local Oregon public broadcast channel that does a weekly show on various things out in the field, so to speak. And it seems like our program would be really well suited to being connected with them. So those are a couple examples of things that I think in terms of communication, we could move up in the queue and not necessarily have to wait for a consultant and another plan to be written.
So instead of assuming that out of the communications plan, it might be a good idea to do X, Y, and Z, are there things are a good idea that you just want to do simultaneous to building out a comms plan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Jim.
There are several questions that came up in my mind looking at some of these action items, and a lot of it is just that I don't understand relationships, but much of these action items, or some of these action items, seem to be better suited for example, the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, but I don't understand the relationship between this committee and the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. Obviously, it is there. How strong it is, I don't know, but when I look at the board of the foundation, many of these action items look better suited for them than us. And that's just a comment. I don't know how to deal with that in this strategic plan, but some of these I think really fit better with our collaborators than they do with us. They still need to be here because I think they're important, but I think that the actual sort of impetus behind some of the action items is probably more suited for an organization like that. Now, that's just some of them, not all of them by any means, but particularly when you start talking about donation opportunities, business opportunities, the business community, that foundation looks pretty well suited for that.
Jim, thanks for that comment. Actually, a really timely comment, and a big part of the strategic plan, one of the other action items, is defining that relationship more or just better. We've had a really strong relationship, but it's kind of been a amorphous one, and we, as needs arose, we'd figure out how to deal with it. Tim told me he was going to be late today. Tim Grathis, who's the chair or the head of that organization, is going to be here later. But part of our strategic plan is precisely what you said. Figure out how the Oregon Wildlife Foundation fits in, not just with this part of it, the telling our story, but a bigger picture. And I'm not sure if you were here when we discussed the fact that there are several models outside of Oregon where there is a nonprofit entity kind of in the public sector that's partnered with the department, and this may be the way for Oregon, for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to have that kind of a strong relationship. That's not to say they don't have a relationship with them already, but we would strengthen that. So your comment is very timely, and I think we agree that there's a lot they can do for us, and at the same time, there's a lot we can do for them.
Yeah, I switched over to another screen just because we're focused on one small part of the document. And so what Carl is referencing is the first sort of part of the document has a lot more specific actions that we're planning to take. And so under one of the priority areas is where this comes up regarding that expanded partnership with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. And that could lead to several different things, right? As Carl was mentioning there, but clearly an action that's important, and whatever happens becomes sort of mutually beneficial to both organizations. So even though I'm sharing that action slide, that's kind of a roll-up summary slide of just one priority area, and there's a lot more in the earlier part of the document.
Right, and
Rita, go ahead. Oh.
Sorry, Jim. I was actually just going to say Tim just joined right as you were finishing up your talking about. So here he is. And Jim was just asking about our relationship with Oregon Wildlife Foundation. So thanks for joining, Tim.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so Jim, one of the things, or Tim, just so you can hear the comments, as we're reviewing this strategic plan, very quickly, Oregon Wildlife Foundation popped up in the discussion, and it was in the context of our outreach and our storytelling, and it was apparent to some of the members that Oregon Wildlife Foundation is in a really good position to do some of those things. And I think what we're finding is that this idea of us developing this stronger relationship just really fits. And we certainly haven't defined what that's going to be, but I think that it clearly is early in this process as we move to actually doing our actions, that conversation with you, Tim, and how can we optimize our relationships so it's mutually beneficial, that needs to be very early on, and once we get through this planning process.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, for those that don't know, Oregon Wildlife Foundation has been around since 1981 and has been a partner with the Department of Fish and Wildlife the entire time. Matter of fact, our genesis is the result of business leaders and former members of the Fish and Wildlife Commission getting together and recognizing that the need for a vehicle through which private gifts could be made to projects of a public benefit. So there's a great overlap here, and we're also all in on the Oregon Conservation Strategy, which is another nexus for us, and then finally public access, and that, you know, those elements, related elements, have continued to be a priority for the foundation. So I think there's a lot of fits there. We've also had a small grant making program since 2004, so we've got some experience on that side too.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim. Just want to bring you up to date.
Great. So back to this slide, any other things that you think need attention from a timeline perspective? I'm also curious about, I purposely left a blank down here that I could use input on, and we might actually want to put a target date for this, securing the contract with a communications consultant.
I think we're going to actually address that later in the meeting.
Okay, so you guys can fill me in later on that one. Any feedback on what maybe a reasonable target might be for this last progress indicator? Mauricio.
I'd say the turtle icon is very adequate for this particular goal. Because it is as much as we would want to, when it becomes the only way that we can get more non-traditional groups with this is that we develop a sense of trust, and that takes a lot of time, and I'm not sure that can be defined by I mean, we could have an aspirational timeline, and we should try to have a goal, but my point being is that this may be one of those that we'll have to have the most patience, and the only way that we can build that trust is to make sure that we are intentional in how we open doors to those that are coming to us already, and that may be a little shy to get in. So I would love to see at least 40% on that blank space, but I feel this may be one of those that just rather than put a number, I'd love to see like an increased efforts as we continue to build trust with non-traditional groups.
Okay. I think that's a good reworking of that one. That makes sense.
I would echo what Mauricio said. I have a little bit of trouble putting a number on some of these things.
Yeah.
Because again, it seems first of all, we don't want to fail at these things, and reaching some of these goals. I think I brought this up. We talked about tribal engagement.
Yes.
We can try like heck and get nowhere, but as long as we're trying, that's what we got to do. And so I really appreciated Mauricio's comments, and I think that's applicable to the tribal actions as well.
Yeah, when we get to that one, maybe we rework the wording the same way. Any thoughts on putting a date for that progress indicator #1 around getting a contract in place, given how this is so important to you all and it kind of kicks off a bunch of other stuff? Do you want to put a target date out there or just leave it the way it is now with, it's clearly a first thing 2024 effort to begin this process?
I'm comfortable with that because we're doing that implies we're working on it right now, which we are.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments or concerns about the breakdown here besides the things we already talked about making some modifications for?
Charlene, I think I'm comfortable with what's there. I guess the other thought that keeps going through my head is, how do we right size this with the capacity that we have? I mean, we have Riva, who's already fully engaged with the granting and the RFP and all that stuff. And Sarah obviously has some attention to OCRF as well. But just as we go through all of these actions and indicators, part of me is, okay, they're great ideas, but I think somewhere we need to think about how are we going to do this? Is it with subcommittees? Is it with other contractors? Is there more staff capacity? I just don't have to answer that in the moment, but I guess it's out there.
I have two thoughts that I wanted to share. So obviously this one, we specifically called out getting contractor support, right? Like between the department and the advisory committee, there isn't likely enough resources. And so the plan is to contract out with a communications consultant. So that's a resource decision there. If you think there are other places like that, I think we should flag those as well, Mark. And then my second comment I was going to make, and I do think I saw this in your note, Mark, was around subcommittees. And so Carl and I and Mauricio talked about this a little bit and thought about and interested in the committee's thoughts that obviously Riva is a part of all 4 of these priority areas, right? We're only on slide #1 of 4 here. But maybe it might be worthwhile to have 1 to 2 committee members that are sort of partnered on each of these priority areas with Riva. So there's sort of concerted effort that Riva plus these 2 folks are the small subcommittee that are driving the actions on this particular, priority area, for example. Didn't know if that kind of aligned with what you were thinking too, Mark.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good start for sure.
And then they would have to respond.
Accountability or ownership of it.
Yeah. Does everybody else think that's a good idea, since we're talking about that right now? The idea that Riva plus a committee member or 2 would be sort of tasked with be the leads, right, for accountability and making sure we're making progress on each area. I'm going back to where I can see faces and people doing things like this that I can't always see necessarily. Thanks, Kelly. Maurette, you have your hand up.
Well, I guess, are you asking about these 4 different actions being the things that we would be involved with? They're all basically around communications.
Right. It would be, Riva, I'm just making up names, right? So Riva and Maurette and Mauricio is the subcommittee that's focused on these broader awareness and understanding actions, whereas some other threesome, including Riva, would be the leads for strategic partnership. Some other threesome might be sort of the lead for funding and investment priorities. Does that help? So there's 4 priority areas and there'd be like 4 little teams. Is that how everybody else understood what I was saying? Okay, awesome. Does that help, Marit?
Yeah.
And do you think it's a good idea, like the others that did thumbs up and things?
Yeah, I just think that some of us have specialties that are more
Right.
applicable. Like, you know, Mark and I probably have more biological background and would be, I know part of this is talking to ODF&W and figuring out what are the real priorities in terms of the Oregon conservation strategy. And that's kind of a science nerdy kind of a job versus more social communication skills, which, you know, Mauricio is great at and
Yeah.
others. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I would anticipate you would pick those group based on interest and capabilities and background.
Okay.
Okay. Am I back on the first slide? Yes, I am. Any other comments on just this first priority area besides what we already talked about? Okay. Not your last chance to see it, by the way, because I'm going to make edits. We're going to wordsmith the front end still a bit. You're going to see the whole plan again. So this is not the end of the conversation. This was the slide about strategic partnerships. Again, some stab at what are some of the high level actions. There are more up in the body of the plan, but I just kind of tried to chunk them into, you know, 4 big actions with some progress indicators. Point well taken on the 3rd progress indicator down there regarding tribes. We won't put a number there. Carl, I'll reword that. But other comments, and what do you think about having a target with a number for the private business partnerships, or would you rather, again, just see an increase without a commitment for a specific number?
I think I'd keep again, we need to work on it. It's hard to know. It's hard to put a number on these things.
Yes, it is. I think I'll rework that one a little bit the same way I'm going to rework the others. Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. I apologize. I looked at these progress indicators before, but I just want to first say how much I really appreciate the committee's understanding that how much progress we're able to make is limited by the available capacity that we have. And so I appreciate that we're not trying to hold ourselves to some hard numbers here. The other thing I wanted to say is that the joint goal statements with the tribes, we have MOUs with the Western Oregon tribes, the federally recognized tribes, and that already have sort of these joint goal statements about working together to, you know, achieve good outcomes for fish and wildlife. And so I don't know that we would probably, I think that would end up being redundant if we went seeking a goal statement specific to OCRF, as opposed to just knowing that we have existing co-management agreements with the tribes. And perhaps a better action we could take would be to request the opportunity to present to tribes on OCRF and raise awareness of OCRF with our tribal partners. Thoughts from
thanks for
committee members on that?
Yeah.
Any thinking we can come up with to help us get connected with tribes is helpful. In my experience, I just met this morning with some tribal members, and it's very difficult to make that happen.
Probably just getting the meeting is difficult, right? Yeah. Riva, you had your hand up. Do you still have it up?
Yes. Yeah, I was actually curious about the private business partnership strategy action and the fact that it's kind of scheduled to start right at the same time as that engaging with and building mutual goals with tribes. Wondering if we could stagger those, because as we've been talking about
resources.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and working with tribes. You don't want it to be done right and well.
Yep, happy to stagger those. Does this look like the right priority ordering the way it is, or would anybody suggest a different, starting on the timeline?
I think staggering it's fine. I mean, I think if it
Okay.
is a committee or Riva, I mean, it's all probably going to go, sort of in between and
Yeah.
all over a little bit.
Okay, good. Thought I saw another hand up over here. No, I didn't. Okay. Great. This is all helpful feedback. Like I said, we took just a stab at giving you something to react to. Mark?
Yeah, I guess the other thing was strategic partnerships is thinking, is there some value in trying to identify a process where we come up with our 3 or half dozen key strategic partners that we would sort of be close to us, and kind of where Jim was going. Maybe it's the Wildlife Foundation as the lead strategic partner, but that we identify a small group, maybe it's just the Wildlife Foundation, but that's really sort of committed to and working closely with us to advance some mutual goals, including some of those with OCRF, so that we have an individual strategic partner or core group of strategic partners that can really help us advance some of these things collectively.
Sarah?
I guess my thought on the strategic partnerships bit is similar to the strategic communications plan. I don't know that we know yet which strategic partnerships we want to invest in and how we want to go about doing that. And I would love to have maybe it's a subcommittee, maybe it's another contract, I'm not sure, but some means of doing that planning to make sure we know exactly where the best bang for the buck is and what capacity there is, either with ODFW or committee members or with our coalition partners. So part of me struggles a little bit with the develop private business partnership strategy and really identifying that now, but before we've done the work of knowing exactly which strategic partnerships we want to invest in.
So it's almost like there's a strategy development component missing here. I hate to use
There's like
strategy.
a scoping.
Yeah, or scoping
before
even.
action.
It might be worth adding that as an overarching umbrella, kind of like we have on the communications one. Mark, that part, I think your hand was up.
This is probably a question for Sarah, and so I'm kind of thinking out loud, so I apologize if I ramble just a little bit, but OCRF, is set up by the legislature and with donations and funding from the general fund. But now, it's morphing just a little bit because the legislature sees OCRF as an avenue to achieve some of their objectives. And for example, the drought money that we got was given, some of it was given to OCRF. Yesterday, there was a legislative hearing on the beaver, and the legislature is looking at giving OCRF, $1.5 million of funding in a strategic, here's what we want you to do with this funding. And so I'm just wondering if, these strategic partnerships, some of them are directed by the legislature to OCRF because they see it as an avenue or a good toolbox to put, different wrenches into to say, we want OCRF doing this. So we want to have that relationship with the legislature, I think, because they're directing money toward us. And yet we want to have other, with private businesses and to tribes and others. And yet we're still getting input from the legislature that says, we want OCRF to do this. And they kind of specifically outline that. So I'm trying to think, Sherilyn, if we ought to identify that and codify it, or just forget about it and just let the chips fall where they may when the legislature gives us money directed towards specific strategic kind of initiatives that they have. So thoughts on that?
Mark, this is that's a fundamental, it's fundamental what you're talking about. Fundamental to what and who is the OCRF. That was part of my discussion today with Debbie. And, the OCRF, as we've all indicated, is desperately in need of we needed baseline support, baseline funding, that we can do all of these things that the broad mandate that we have, the RFPs we've been doing. That's foundational to us. And I think many of these actions and partnerships that we're talking about is focused on that. The way I look at these interventions coming in from the legislatures is gravy on top of it.
Mhm.
And we react to that. We'll react to that. If they want us to work with the soil and water conservation districts and the watersheds councils to do beaver mitigation, absolutely, we'll jump into that as it arises. And we don't want to discourage that kind of funding coming our way. Same thing with the wildlife crossings. But we also I think a lot of this is more focused on the basic fundamental thing of who the OCRF is and who we've been for the last 3 years. And we'll react to those and develop those relationships as need be. We've done it. We worked with Trout Unlimited and the other entities that provided us with the drought funding. And so I appreciate you bringing it up, but it is a different thing. But I think it's unpredictable, and if we say anything in this, is we will develop the relationships that are necessary with directed funding as it arises, and because we just don't know what that's going to be.
Yeah, I think you described that so well.
It's important to have it in there because we don't want to discourage it. We don't want to have the legislature think that we don't think it's wonderful that they're giving us this earmark money. But we also want to make it clear that that's not, that we're about way more than that. And we want to, that's not necessarily our core mission.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the hands, but I was just going to mention to Mark in the section regarding funding investment strategies in the prior up part of the plan, it's very specific about responding to the things that come to the OCRF, like drought money, wildlife crossings, things like that is still an important priority. It just is something somewhere different in the plan. Mauricio.
Okay, maybe it sounds like it's already addressed then.
I think so.
Wording. Okay, thank you.
But good comment, because I might tweak some of the wording in this section, Mark, so that people don't misinterpret that to suggest that we are also directed by the legislature and the money that comes and the partnerships that you need to maintain just to be the good stewards of the things that are coming your way. So I might actually monkey some of the wording to make sure nobody else asks that same question, Mark, or help mitigate against it. They still might. Mauricio.
Thank you, Sherilyn. I think there is an aspect of what Commissioner Lockhart was mentioning that I think it's also points to the parallel efforts that many of these action lists are coming through. For instance, as to your point, Carl, unless we have a clear understanding of what is our identity as the OCRF, then we would know what is that we can bring to these strategic partnerships. You know, what is it that we can offer to private businesses and tribes if we don't know how our missions align and we have very clear how is that we can be in service of them and have mutual benefit. And so I think I don't think that my comment changes the composition of the document, but I think at the very least adds sort of like a level of importance of how many of these processes need to be happening at the same time. Once we have very clear what is our story, then we can start having those conversations about this is what's going to be of benefit to you as a private business as we try to move this thing together. For instance, in this particular slide, I would love to imagine that in the first half of 2024, we've already had conversations with folks who have had success establishing private business partnerships and partnerships with tribes. What would it take? What does it look like? And how does that fit within our mandate? And so it's sort of like you cannot put the seat on the horse before you buy it, sort of thing. I feel that all this work needs to happen both at the same time, but we have to have a clear understanding of why this is taking place in the timeline where it is and what needs to happen before we can move forward. Not sure where that would go, if any, but I think it's important for us to know to be as effective as possible. Otherwise, we're going to be exactly in the position which we are right now, that if the opportunity to have that conversation and say, hey, just like we have on the hunt and license transaction aspect, that we can continue to add into our fund, what kind of premise can we bring to other processes similar to those that can allow us to keep growing and continue to provide these opportunities to all these folks?
Thanks for that. That makes a lot of sense. Jim?
I hope I'm not too off track on this, but on page 2, this at the very start of the strategic plan, it talks about and it references House Bill 2829, and I could probably answer my own question, but the question I've got is that is there language in that bill that would help up front with this idea of what it is and what the expectation is for the committee that would help the plan? I mean, to set some parameters on it. And I felt that was missing, but I haven't read the bill. Lots of times bills are very vague about the reasons they're created, but lots of other times there's some specific language in there that talks about the purpose of this committee is this and this and this. And that's kind of what I was looking for. The fact that I didn't find it may mean that it was a very vague bill. But I think if there is some language in there, it might be helpful to include that up front.
Yeah, some of the language from the vision and the purpose at the beginning are borrowed from the bill, and what we had talked about is maybe linking to the bill itself for people that wanted to see it without having to put all the language here in the plan, besides just some basic purpose comments.
Well, I think just if there are some quotes that you could quote directly from the bill, it would be very pertinent and important to put it in the front part of the strategic plan.
Yeah, I think there are some in there and they're not in quotes, right? So I take your note, Jim, on making it more overt where it's coming from.
Okay, I know we're
it's
No,
interesting.
it's not a distraction at all.
I think that's an important point that's sort of pertinent to what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Jim, that's very timely for you to bring that up because we had this discussion. I think Sherilyn, when we met, is like how much to put forward the fact that we had this bill that created us, and when do we stop talking about that? And I think when you've been with this, the people that have been here for 3 years are all like, oh yeah, that's Bill, whatever, and it said this. But it's the new people that need that information. They need that history. They need the context. What did that bill say? And then for all of us that sort of have internalized it, probably can't really cite what it really said.
You
But
just know.
we've internalized it. So I think we had this exact conversation about
Okay,
how much to include in the document. And
okay, it's
and-
just,
Good
to me,
input.
it's really important because that's basically where our authority comes from. And it's a very, very basic part of, I think, understanding what the committee should do.
Yeah. And I do think it's very well reflected in our mission statement and the who we are kind of statement. We lifted things straight from it, but we didn't necessarily reference it. And what we concluded, which I still think is a great thing, is in this document, there'll be hyperlinks and we'll mention that bill and you click on the bill and it takes you right to the bill, rather than us reiterating it over and over again. And I think that we have worked hard enough to incorporate all of that into our mission statement and goals and vision. I think that's inherent in that. And then to get the specifics, you can hyperlink and absolutely read the bill and what it says. But that's great insight coming from someone who's just joined the committee. And I'll not to belabor this, when I was on the OWEB board, it had been going on for many, many years. And much of the history was lost. People didn't really know the origin story of OWEB, and it was really quite a fascinating story. And it had lots of twists and turns. And so while I was on the OWEB board, there was this big effort to sort of rewrite the history or write the history where you could grab it. So people like myself who just joined and had no idea. So we want to build that. So your point's very well taken. We want to build that concept in that you can find the story. We got a great story as well. So we want to make sure that we're able to tell that. So yeah, thanks for the comment. Sorry for the digression.
Oh, that's okay. I know, Liza, you had your hand up earlier,
Oh, thank you, because
but then you took it down.
I lost my hand raising ability. I
Oh.
thought I got
I
sent to
remembered seeing it though.
Thank you, thank you. And maybe this was answered, but do we define what building mutual goals means with tribes? I've never seen it written like that.
Yeah, and I think now it needs to be reworked based on Sarah's comment that there are
Okay.
already some joint memorandums of understanding with the tribe. So we're gonna have to rework I didn't know that when I wrote it, so
Yeah.
I'll rework that.
I'm wondering about the intention of that.
I think the intention when we wrote it is that if we're going to engage with tribes more than we have been in an overt way, how do we come up with some common objectives? I won't use the word goal, like the things that we want to do together that we think is good for OCRF and the tribes think it's good for them. So it's kind of this, what's some mutual objectives that we have and want to work together on to achieve. That was why we wrote it to begin with, was to accomplish that.
Is it similar to developing partnership strategies that we're talking about with private business?
I think it is. And so based on Sarah's comment, when I rework this section, I like the idea of having a strategy for these relationships and then going out and kind of executing on the different strategies based on a deliberate identification of goals, the specific kinds of private businesses. Maybe there are certain tribes over others, kind of approach.
Okay, I was looking at that like raising awareness of opportunities that we have for tribes to participate. And I know OWEB, of course, has a lot of staff, but they are able to attend, tribe, when the tribes get together to discuss wildlife, natural resources, they can attend, and it might be an action item for one of us to be able to go and attend and talk about that. I just want to make sure I understood what the intention was. Thank you.
I think that all aligns. So Riva, I don't want to be the sole person responsible for blowing up your agenda since we're over the time slot you put aside for this. So we talked about 2 of the 4. You own the agenda, so do you want to try to talk about the other 2 or just let people provide their feedback the way they've been doing already based on some of the emails I got this morning?
My preference would be to go ahead. And because we
Yep.
scheduled ourselves to be
Awesome.
done, a little early. So how do people feel about that? Should we continue with this or leave it so you comment offline?
That's great. I like hearing the conversation versus just getting individual emails from people. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
check before I
let's
keep going.
try to keep everybody moving.
Great. So why don't we talk about the third priority area, which is funding and investment priorities. So you can see the actions here about identifying, unmet needs, creating a review schedule. And again, there's more detail up above in the plan. Thinking about statewide goals, tailoring and adapting each of the cycle based on, this was a lot of that responsiveness, Mark, to money that might come in that's specified for specific kinds of things. That's where the tailoring comes into place. And then you'll see there's some progress indicators there to help us know, are we being successful in this area?
I think this is a good place for you to put something about that flexibility or the ability to respond to a funding that arises I don't know the right word for it, earmark funding or whatever that we'll get from the legislature. It seems like it was explained to me that it's a lot easier to pass a bill that's very specific to a given thing, and that it's easier for the legislature to give us that kind of money than it is to give us general funds and say, do whatever you want with it. We need both, but we're going to get some of that latter part. So having some wording in here that allows us to be responsive to that targeted funding, it would be good, not just for us, but for our partners that read this and say, we're going to work on being responsive to that and be able to manage it appropriately.
Good.
I think targeted funding is maybe a good term for it.
Targeted funding. Okay. Other thoughts in this area? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I guess one thing that goes through my mind looking at this, which is about funding, but then also the following one about operational excellence. And we talk about unmet funding needs relative to the conservation strategy, but I think in terms of operational excellence, I'd be interested in some bullet point trying to identify, per our mission in House Bill 2829, what is the level of funding we need to achieve those missions or advance all of the components of that mission to sort of have operational excellence. So to me, it's a little bit interwoven with both of those strategies or categories, if you will, but
and what would be the
to me,
specific
that's
action?
part of operational excellence is sort of being able to describe the funding we need to achieve what's laid out in 2829.
Is that met with the last of those, the level of administrative support? Funding is adequate to achieve OCR strategic and program goals. Is that what you're referring to, Mark? The for operational excellence, it's just basically what do we need to actually make it happen?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that covers it, right? Because when you read the more detail in the plan, those administrative costs are about allowing the OCRF to adequately staff and support the program. I'm not sure if that gets at just the money needed to address the unmet conservation needs.
Yeah, this is more the logistics of.
Yeah, exactly. This is making sure you have staff to keep the grant program up and running. So it might be slightly different, I think, Mark, because you're looking at, you know, the unmet needs, right? Would cost us, I'm just throwing out a number, you know, $10 million over the next 5 years if we wanted to fill the gap,
Yeah.
bridge the gap.
Yeah, well, maybe that fits just under the funding and investment priorities.
Yeah, so maybe in the main part of the text, we might put something around that.
But
Other
that
thoughts?
number, the number's infinity.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard to put a number on it.
I bet
Some
it would
ways,
be.
there's a little bit of constraint on capacity. Like there's only so much money we can spend. Well, it's actually so many projects we can fund. We could
Right.
always raise the limit, but it's going to be hard to say we need $50 million. You know, it's
Mhm.
difficult to identify a number like that.
Mhm.
Sherilyn, please, this is Liza. I don't know how to raise my hand.
That's
Please
okay.
use the words operational excellence. I love that so much.
Yeah, that's
Wherever you can
what
put-
we're titling. That's the title of that
Oh,
fourth
it's right
priority
there.
area.
I couldn't see that. Thank you. I don't know how to do split screen, so I can't look at the priorities.
The
in this.
faces and yeah. No worries. Yeah, I liked that label for everything that came up as part of that, you know, how we interact with our grant applicants, how the process works for them, all that kind of stuff, how we plan for, you know, long-term committee success. So good. I'm glad you like that. Any other thoughts on Mark's comment around the funding need and or other things regarding the actions and timeline here? Okay. So we'll move on to operational excellence. Speaking of, so this was the fourth and final priority area. And again, more detail in the first 7 pages of the plan, but we kind of summarized it into 3 big action areas with those progress indicators down below. Something seems missing here, but it might be because there's greater detail in the first 7 pages. So comments on this category of work. All right.
I'll just add that that first one, review, refine application
Yes.
process and documents, that you could probably spread that timeline to the
True.
beginning of 2024 because that's an ongoing
Yes.
thing that I'm working on and that should be continued to get better and better as we review and refine each round of applications.
Well, and really what we could do is extend it through the whole period.
Yeah.
Because the wording up
ongoing.
above does say that each grant cycle you would look and sort of see if adjustments need to be made. So I will do that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. This was probably the easiest one, was the last one, so that's kind of a good thing. Carl.
Sherilyn, looking at these actions and the graphic that you have, the reality is we're doing those things. As Reva said, you could move the top one over to
Yeah.
the right, to the left. You could do that for all of them because in our PAT, the whole time we've done this, every time we do RFP, we're looking at ways to improve that process. That's sort of built into our deal. We've been doing that all along. Same way for the plan and execute smooth committee turnover. That is something we need to work on.
Yeah, that
because
one, I think, is a newer sort of more
Yeah.
overt attention to that.
But those top two for sure could just
Yep.
extend the whole way, including starting in 2024, because as soon as we'll figure out all the things that aren't working in this next RFP, and we'll try to make them better. So that's already ongoing.
Sounds good. And you'll see there's more detail up above about the in-person meetings that came up and some other things that get into the detail on what that really looks like. And then Reva's been pulling up what the term expirations really do look like, and they do kind of all expire around the same time. So it's good to have that on the radar and begin to have some plan so that you don't all disappear like, Cinderella at the end of the night one day. That would probably not be a good thing.
And just a note on that, so we don't freak everyone out, they do all expire around the same time in 2026, but the governor's office said they could be extended, and it wasn't a hard deadline to terminate or to finish your appointment, that could be extended. So
Great. Well, barring any other comments, maybe we'll talk about next steps. Sound okay? I know, Carl, you got kicked out again. Glad you're
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, I'm back. So
One
let's
of those
move on.
kind of days.
Next step.
So I'm going to do a round of edits based on the things we talked about in the meeting. I'm also going to look at all the emails I got, because I got several today, but like I said, I haven't looked at them in detail yet. Make sure if they didn't come up in the conversation, I didn't miss them. Carl, and there will be an introductory letter that Carl and Ratio will insert, and we've been working, the three of us, on that. I have something to send the two of you tomorrow probably on that. So when you see the next plan, that letter, introductory letter, will be in there. Full committee member, when you see it again, the letter will be in there. And the goal is to have that to you in advance of the March meeting, so that the March is kind of the final, we're adopting this as the plan. And then, as mentioned in my note, ODFW staff is putting the look and feel on the document. So I've been more responsible for the words that are in there, not for the graphical look and feel of the plan. So that'll happen after the March meeting, when we know we're happy with all the words that we have. But in the meantime, I would say between now and let's say, I know you've already, for the existing plan, so not my edits that I'm going to do after today. If you didn't really have a good chance to look at it before today's meeting, and you're kind of catching up, or you want to go back and look at it one more time, if you could just send me any comments back by the 16th, Friday the 16th, just give you another chance to look through it. Again, it won't have the edits we talked about today. It'll be the same version you got ahead of this meeting, but I know some people I didn't get an email from, and you might just not have had a chance to get to it. So by the 16th, one more chance to give me feedback on that. That way I can put it into the final version that I give you back before the March meeting. Great. Really appreciate all your input and seeing you again today.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Sherilyn. We really appreciate it. And like when you helped form us in the very beginning, this has been a really nice process. I want to share, I don't think you were here when Marette, her comments were how we did not waste our 3 months in this time that we didn't have an RFP, and we're really going to have a nice positive outcome for the efforts that we put into it, thanks to the work you've done for us. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thanks. It's always lovely working with you. I'm happy that I'll get to see you one more time in March. And then, yeah, I'm intrigued on how your communications meeting goes. So when we talk again, Carl, you guys can fill me on if you think anything needs to adjust in the language as a result. Okay.
Great.
All right. See you all later.
Bye, Sherilyn. So
thank you, Sherilyn.
We've got a few things to do. Should we take a break? Should we give people a break they need to go to the bathroom real quick, and then we got just a couple of things, because pretty much we have public comment. Maybe we should ask for public comment and see, or put that out there. Let's take a break until 3:16, quick break. And if you have public comment, send it to Riva. Otherwise, we'll just move on with our communication plan proposal. And that's all we've got left. But let's take a quick break, because it's been a long meeting to hear. So we'll see you back at 3:16. Okay. Whew.
Got 5 minutes on my time.
All right, Reva, have you got a slide for the communications plan?
I do. And Carl, did you want to do that urgent grant, revisit the urgent grant process before we get into that or after?
Yeah, and actually what we should do, just because we're still pretty close to the original time for public comment,
Mhm.
let's ask for that. And then do the,
All right.
did anyone communicate with you wanting to make a public comment?
Let me just double check, but I haven't seen anything yet. Let's see here. No, I haven't seen any comments for public comment, but if any members of the public would like to do so and you haven't put it in the chat, now would be the time.
There are some folks out there and we appreciate you participating. So thank you for showing the interest. And you can see we're working hard to try to make it good. So I think if we don't have any responses, let's go ahead. Reva, do you have that revised? You have to do that. Do you have that revised?
I do. So I just pulled it up here. We revised the urgent grant process a little bit here with some of the advisory committee's comments and then added, so made this an optional presentation here, and then we could also reschedule this meeting to expedite the process for applicants through this urgent grant process. And then we also added, Sarah worked on this, rewording the preamble here so that it's a little bit more clear that it's supposed to be an expedited fast track, a little bit faster than our normal grant cycle, but it will still take several months to approve and execute the agreement or work can begin here. So I don't know if you guys can see that okay. It's a little small. I'm happy to read it.
Why don't you read that? Yeah.
Yeah, it says, so this is for the pre-application, just so we're on the same page. This would not be the full application. This is that pre-application that they're going to fill out. It says, please provide an explanation of your need for expedited funding from the OCRF by answering the questions below. This pre-application form should be kept brief, not to exceed 3 pages. To be considered in OCRF's urgent grant process, you need to demonstrate that your project is time sensitive, addresses a critical need, and explain why you are unable to wait for the next normal OCRF grant solicitation. Please keep in mind that even though urgent grants are on a faster track than our normal cycle, it will still take a few months to approve and execute agreements before the work can begin. So that's what we've tried to work in there. I don't know how folks feel about that.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah and Reva, for working that in. So is everyone okay with that? Does anyone have any comments against it or to modify it further? Can we just do a raise of hands for this? All in favor? It looks pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so I believe, do we need to do a draft motion? Probably.
We can do a motion for this, yeah.
Let's just do it. Let's do the draft motion. Let's try to make this appropriate. So
I move to approve the OCRF urgent grant process. That's it.
Can we get a second?
I second.
All in favor? Now we do it. Great. Hey, thank you all for very much for that. Again, this came out really nice. I really, it's nice and tight and keeps us responsive. So thanks. So Reva, why don't we move on to the communication piece?
Yeah. Yeah, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is what we have drafted up as our next real big ticket item, action item. The strategic plan would be putting forth a strategic communications plan and working with potentially a contractor with Oregon Wildlife Foundation, if they're amenable to that, and doing something similar that they've done to help us set up the strategic planning process with Sherilyn. And, you know, we're hoping that Tim would be amenable to that for our strategic communications plan, in making that happen at a much faster time scale than would be available if we went through ODFW processes. So yeah, I don't know if Carl or Sarah wanted to jump in here and talk a little bit more about this communications plan that we had thought about.
Yeah, one of the things that was clear from our strategic planning that we needed to tell our story better. That was, you know, everyone agreed. And we thought, and everyone also has concerns, we're going to do the strategic plan and not actually do anything. Well, what we decided was, let's do something before we even finish the strategic plan, and we'll actually do something. So one of the things that we all agree on is this need. Sarah has told us that it is certainly within the feasibility of the way things are structured, that we can spend some of the funds held at the Oregon Wildlife Foundation to contract with a communications business that does this as their line of work, and that would help us to formulate a strategic communication plan to basically tell our story. This step here is just so that we get consensus that we want the details. We don't have the details. We don't know who it's going to be. We need to talk to Tim about the best way to formulate this, and that all can happen offline. But this is just to see if the committee is comfortable with going ahead with this and approving. We don't have the numbers. We don't have, you know, the specifics, but to see if this is the direction people want to go. So anybody have any comments about this idea?
Carl, I think it's a great idea. The only questions I haven't worked with the state of Oregon enough to know how ODF&W looks at outside money coming in to support and what the strings are to that. But if this is doable under those guidelines, absolutely, I think this is a great idea. If Oregon Wildlife Foundation is in agreement and willing, I think this is certainly something we need to do. We need to get the word out and about the opportunities for everybody in Oregon, or all the groups in Oregon, to participate with this. And I think that'll help. Probably won't help our job be easier, but it'll help, I think, get quality projects in. So I think it's great.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'd leave that to Sarah to comment on ability for us to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And good question, Jim. So the statute is specific to funds that are in the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. Those require committee approval of expenditure and commission approval of expenditure. However, there's a relationship that OCRF has had for a long time with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, where interested individuals can donate funds to the foundation to help the OCRF with its mission. And so those funds that are held by the Oregon Wildlife Foundation are not subject to the statutory requirements of commission approval. We have sort of the ability to make the most appropriate decisions for the use and expenditure of those funds consistent with the goals and objectives of the OCRF and consistent with the way the Oregon Wildlife Foundation operates. So we're on very firm ground for process-wise. I think we just, as just a good governance, still want this committee to be supportive and be approving expenditures of those donation pots that are sort of sitting outside of the main fund, so that we're putting them toward the right uses. And as Carl said, I mean, the ink's not even dry on the strategic plan yet, and we're ready to take action, which I think is awesome and is the OCRF way. We don't like to rest. And I think that everything that we just talked about in the strategic plan sort of hinged on that foundational need of figuring out who is our audience, why do we want to tell our story, how do we want to tell it, where are the most effective venues. And there are, like Mauricio, there are people whose whole professions are around asking groups like us those key questions that really help you get very strategic with your communication, so it is going to the right places and it has the desired effect. And so that's what a consultant could help us do, sort of help us figure out the answers to those questions and figure out what the most appropriate media are. And then not only that, actually develop the content with us. So I'm excited about the idea. I feel like this is sort of the linchpin to a lot more of the other actions like strategic partnerships, et cetera, that we talked about in the strategic plan. And just really also very appreciative of our partnership with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation for making this even possible. Liza Jane, that's her hand up.
Liza Jane, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, do you see in here that we have included the tie to our strategic partnerships? Like, I look for words like outreach and inclusion, and this looks more like it's really directed to letting the whole world know what we do, versus trying to increase our non-traditional grant applicants. Is it different, or is it all in the same? Is it good enough?
I think it's in here. So this upper section, I just pulled that out of the draft strategic plan. But I think what I view as being in a strategic communication strategy is the answers to those key questions of why and who and how. And so, yes, Liza Jane, to your point, that's the strategy. You can build stories and then just put them out into the ether, but you really kind of have to have, like, who are we actually targeting? Why are we doing it? And it is all of those reasons, I think, that we've talked about and that are baked into the strategic plan, like, increasing inclusivity, reinvigorating or building new strategic partnerships, long-term sustainability of the program.
Yeah, great. That's the why. That's
the why.
That will come. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments about this? Mauricio?
Oh man, I'm a little, of course, I'm a little reluctant to speak about it because this is, as you say, Sarah, sort of like a lot of the breadth of my work and my professional. And so it is crucial. And to your point, Liza, this is so important. This ability to be able to tell our story is so crucial for all these other aspects of our strategy altogether. And so I think this is extremely important. And I think that the Oregon Wildlife Foundation is uniquely equipped to know how those stories can be told. We have had a relationship with them that has seen us from birth, essentially, and an experience in working with the states that's, I don't think that we would be able to find better hands to handle this. And we do have an advantage of, like, because this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking and working with. By the time we get to the proper communication strategy, we have an ability to have a more of an informed opinion on where and whether or not this is going in the direction that feels is honoring this general strategy that we're trying to build together. So I am, of course, in favor for this. I see how this piece fits in the larger puzzle of the things that we want to accomplish. And I feel very comfortable saying that the foundation is the better suited to take on this task.
Thanks, Mauricio. I think that's now the time to find out if Tim's willing to do it.
Yeah, we're happy to help. Whatever we can do.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. All right. So again, we're very short on details, and this is going to evolve with discussions, I think, with myself and Tim. And since Mauricio just volunteered to be on the committee to do all this, we'll we don't actually have a committee, but
honored to be there if and when needed, of course.
We maybe should have a committee about this. I hadn't thought about that, to help kind of shepherd this through, and then maybe bring back some specifics to the committee, so we, when we have some numbers and have some ideas. So the more I think about it, the more it would be nice to have a committee to do this, which I'll certainly be a part of. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer for that committee? Do we have a volunteer? Anyone?
Aside from me, Carl, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I volunteered you. I want you to volunteer.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be there, of course.
You volunteered. I didn't volunteer. Great. So me, Mauricio, anyone else would like to be engaged with this and have some discussions with Tim about how we go about this?
I mean, I'm happy to help if you want an extra head in the room. It's, it's not like my my wheelhouse, but I'm happy to be there.
Kelly, let me tell you, Kelly,
I would love to see it there. Yes.
I was going to say, Kelly, I was hoping you would say that. I just feel like you would be very helpful. So
Good. Well, I'm happy to spend more time with you and Mauricio. That'll be great.
Okay. Well then,
and
Tim, we will. I'll get together with them and we'll come up with a time. Maybe we can have some discussion. But I think formally it would be nice to go ahead and have the committee approve. We have a committee, but have the full committee approve this idea of expenditures for donations held by Oregon Wildlife Foundation to support a new contract as listed here. Did you happen to have a motion written up, or is that more or less it that's on the screen, Reva?
I don't have a motion, and I don't know if we really need one for this situation. But I think if the committee is on board, then we could move forward.
Well then, without a formal thing, let me We didn't get a lot of comments. Let me just get everybody's picture up here. And let me see, and put your video on if you're there, and let me see a show of hands if you're okay with this. All right. All right, looks pretty good. All right, good. Then that's good enough. We will go ahead and make that happen. So with that, I think we are at the end of the meeting. As far as a wrap up goes, I think this was a good decision to move ahead with this. It's pretty foundational. I appreciate everyone's time and was so gratified to hear your comments early on about the work that Sherilyn is doing. We didn't, and Marat, thank you for commenting and your sense that we did not waste our time this last 3 months. That's really important to me, and I appreciate those comments. So with that, are there any other parting thoughts? Otherwise, we'll meet next month and make a final approval. And by then we may have a little bit more information about moving forward, maybe some idea of costs with regard to a communications plan. So we good? All right. Well, thank you all for another fantastic meeting. Appreciate everyone's input.
Thanks, everybody.